You have 12 unfinished projects right now, maybe more. You don't actually believe that number, but somewhere in a drawer, a folder, a notes app, the evidence is sitting there waiting to prove you wrong. Why do you keep starting things you never finish? It isn't because you're lazy. Lazy people don't start 12 things. Lazy people don't buy the gym membership, download the app, write the first 3 chapters, build the website nobody sees. You start every time. The starting was never the problem. Think about the last thing you abandoned. Not the failure itself, the exact moment you stopped. Was it boring or was it close to working? Here's the uncomfortable pattern. Most people quit right around the point where the project stops being an idea and starts becoming real. The sketch was exciting, the first draft was thrilling, then the editing began, then the feedback came, then the thing had to actually exist in the world where it could be judged, and that's when the notebook closed. There's a name for what happens in your brain during an unfinished task. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect, named after Bluma Zeigarnik, who noticed something strange about waiters in a Vienna restaurant. They could remember complicated unpaid orders in perfect detail. The second the bill was paid, the memory vanished. Open loops occupy mental space, closed loops release it. This explains why starting feels so good. The moment you begin something new, your brain opens a loop, and that open loop pulls at your attention, gives you a small current of energy, almost a high. You feel productive before you've produced anything. That feeling is real, it's also temporary, and it's not actually about the project. It's about your brain rewarding the opening of the loop, not the closing of it. Beat Skinner's research on reinforcement explains why this keeps happening on a loop. Skinner showed that behavior gets repeated based on what gets rewarded, and the timing of that reward matters more than people assume. Starting something new delivers reward immediately. You imagine the result, you feel the rush of possibility, and your brain logs that as a win before any actual work has happened. Continuing something old delivers almost nothing in comparison. The 9th hour of editing a manuscript doesn't feel like the first hour of dreaming it up. So your brain, which is simply following the reward, keeps nudging you toward new beginnings and away from old commitments, not because new ideas are better, but because new ideas pay out faster. So what happens when the excitement fades and the real work begins? This is where most people assume the answer is discipline. Push harder, try harder, want it more. But that explanation skips the actual mechanism, and it leaves you blaming your character for something that's closer to a wiring issue. Here's what's really happening. Finishing something means it can be evaluated. A half-built website can't fail. A half-written book can't be rejected. As long as the project stays unfinished, it stays safe, suspended in a version of potential where it's still allowed to be perfect. The moment you finish it, that protection disappears. Psychologist Albert Bandura spent decades studying what he called self-efficacy, your internal belief about whether you're capable of producing a specific outcome. People with low self-efficacy in a particular area don't avoid starting. They avoid the moment of proof, and starting requires hope. Finishing requires evidence. And if some part of you doubts the evidence will be good, some part of you will always find a reason to stop one step before you'd have to find out. Does that sound familiar? The redesign that needed just one more pass. The manuscript that needed more research before you could send it anywhere. The business plan that kept getting more detailed instead of getting submitted. You weren't improving the project, you were postponing the verdict. Notice how this shows up in small, ordinary places too. The email you've rewritten 6 times and still haven't sent, the playlist of half-finished songs on your phone, the course you're 70% through sitting untouched for months, right at the part where you'd have to apply what you learned. None of these stalled because the work got harder. They stalled because finishing them meant finding out whether they were good enough. And not knowing felt safer than knowing. There's another layer underneath this, and it's about identity, not ability. Right now, you are someone who is working on something. That identity is comfortable. It comes with permission to dream, permission to imagine the outcome, permission to tell people I'm working on it, and watch their faces light up with possibility. The moment you finish, you become someone who made a specific, finite, judgeable thing. The unlimited version of you, the one who could have made anything, disappears. In its place stands one real result. For a lot of people, that trade feels like a loss, even when the result is good. This is also where perfectionism hides, disguised as high standards. Perfectionism isn't really about wanting things to be excellent. It's about needing to avoid the discomfort of something being seen and judged as less than excellent. So the work expands, the deadline slides, the almost done stretches into months. Not because you don't care enough, because you care exactly enough to be terrified of the moment it stops being yours to control. Carol Dweck's research on mindset adds another piece here. People operating from what she calls a fixed mindset treat every finished product as a verdict on their fundamental worth. Good outcome means I'm talented, bad outcome means I'm not. People operating from a growth mindset treat the same outcome as information. This worked, this didn't. Here's what I do differently next time. All right, if finishing feels like a referendum on your entire identity, of course, some part of you avoids the finish line. You're not avoiding the work, you're avoiding the verdict. So how do you actually finish something knowing all of this? The shift isn't about trying harder to push through resistance. Willpower was never the missing ingredient. The shift is changing what finishing means before you get there. Decide in advance that the finished version doesn't have to be the best version. It has to be a version. A real, existing, imperfect thing that lives outside your head, where it can be improved later instead of perfected forever inside a draft that never leaves your laptop. Set a deliberately smaller finish line than the one you're imagining. Not the masterpiece, the shipped version, the submitted version, the published version. Researchers who study behavior change, including BJ Fogg's work on tiny habits, have shown again and again that shrinking the target doesn't weaken your results. It removes the threshold that was stopping you from starting the next loop at all. A finished small thing teaches your brain that finishing is survivable. A perfect unfinished thing teaches your brain nothing except how to stay safe. There's a second shift just as important. Stop measuring the project by how good it could theoretically become and start measuring it by what version of it is allowed to exist in the world today. A book that exists imperfectly can be revised in a second edition. A book that exists only in your head can never be revised because it was never tested against anything real. Perfect and unfinished isn't actually perfect. It's just unfinished, wearing a better excuse. There's a strange relief on the other side of this, one most people never get to feel because they never cross it. The moment after you finish something is rarely as dangerous as the moment before. The website goes live and the sky does not fall. The email gets sent and the reply, when it comes, is just a reply. The verdict you spent weeks avoiding turns out to be survivable almost every single time. Your brain just has no proof of that yet because you keep stopping before the proof can arrive. And here's the part that actually matters tonight, not someday. Pick one unfinished thing right now, not the biggest one, the one closest to done. Define what finished means for it in one sentence, not make it amazing. Something concrete. Send the email, publish the post, submit the file, close the tab, and call it done. Then do that one specific thing before you go to sleep tonight. Picture yourself a year from now, looking back at this exact moment. One version of that future you has a drawer full of almost. Drafts that almost shipped, plans that almost launched, a version of yourself that almost existed, frozen permanently in potential. The other version of that future you has a small, unglamorous list of things that are simply done, not perfect. Done. And done compounds. Each finished thing makes the next one feel less dangerous because you've already survived the moment of being seen. You don't have 12 unfinished projects because you're lazy and you don't need more discipline to fix it. You have 12 unfinished projects because some part of you has been protecting an idea of yourself that can never lose by never letting anything reach the point where it could be judged. Tonight, you get to choose differently. Pick the one closest to the finish line, define what done actually looks like, and finish it before you sleep. Not because it will be perfect, but because it will finally be real.